Marcus Chun had everything money could buy, yet he felt completely empty inside. Standing in his penthouse overlooking the glittering lights of downtown Seattle, surrounded by luxury that most people could only dream of, he realized that wealth had become both his blessing and his curse. Every relationship he'd ever had felt transactional. Every friendship seemed to come with hidden agendas, and every woman who showed interest in him left him wondering if they saw him or just his bank account. At 28, the heir to a tech empire worth over $2 billion had reached a breaking point that would lead him to make a decision so radical it would completely transform his understanding of love, authenticity, and what it truly means to be valued for who you are rather than what you possess. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The idea came to Marcus during one of those sleepless nights, when the weight of his inherited fortune felt more like a prison than a privilege. He had been scrolling through his phone, mindlessly swiping through social media, when he stumbled upon a dating app called HeartConnect. Unlike the exclusive, invitation-only platforms where everyone knew everyone's net worth before the first hello, this was different. This was real people looking for genuine connections, sharing stories about their daily struggles, their dreams that didn't involve private jets or yacht parties, their hopes for simple happiness that money couldn't guarantee. Something about the authenticity in those profiles struck him deeply. Here were teachers talking about their passion for education despite the modest salary, nurses sharing photos from their 12-hour shifts with exhausted but fulfilled smiles, artists selling their work at weekend markets to pay rent while pursuing their creative dreams. These weren't people looking for a financial upgrade in their dating life. These were individuals seeking something Marcus had never truly experienced: unconditional acceptance based purely on character, compatibility, and genuine affection. That night, Marcus made a decision that would have horrified his family's PR team and sent his board of directors into cardiac arrest. He was going to create a completely false identity and see if someone could love him for who he really was, stripped of every material advantage that had defined his existence since birth. Not Marcus Chun, the billionaire heir whose every move made financial headlines, but someone ordinary, someone struggling, someone who had to work for every dollar and dream about luxuries instead of taking them for granted. He spent the next 3 days crafting his alter ego with the same meticulous attention to detail he applied to business deals. Meet Matt Carter, a 26-year-old freelance graphic designer living in a modest apartment in the Queen and neighborhood. Matt drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the rear bumper, shopped at discount grocery stores, and carefully budgeted every expense to make ends meet. His apartment was small but cozy, decorated with thrift store finds and artwork from local artists he genuinely admired. Matt's biggest splurge was his monthly coffee subscription, and his dream vacation was a camping trip to the Olympic Peninsula because international travel was financially out of reach. Marcus rented a studio apartment under his false identity, complete with furniture that looked lived in rather than designer perfect. He practiced his backstory until it felt natural, studying the real struggles of creative professionals, learning about the gig economy, understanding what it meant to choose between paying rent early or buying groceries for the week. He even got a part-time job at a local coffee shop, not because he needed the money, but because he needed the credibility and the genuine experience of working for hourly wages. Creating Matt's dating profile required a level of vulnerability Marcus had never allowed himself. Instead of photos taken by professional photographers on exotic vacations, Matt's pictures showed him in everyday situations, sketching in a park, laughing with friends at a dive bar, cooking pasta in his tiny kitchen, walking through Pike Place Market with a second-hand camera around his neck. His bio spoke about his love for design, his hope to start his own studio someday, his belief that the best adventures were the ones you created with the right person regardless of budget. The first few weeks on the app were eye-opening in ways Marcus hadn't anticipated. Messages poured in from women who were attracted to Matt's authenticity, his humble dreams, his obvious passion for his creative work. They shared stories about their own financial struggles, their career aspirations, their desire to find someone who understood that happiness didn't require a platinum credit card. For the first time in his adult life, Marcus was connecting with people who had no agenda beyond genuine human connection. Then Elena Rodriguez appeared in his matches, and everything changed. Her profile picture showed a woman with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed to light up the screen. She was an elementary school teacher in Tacoma, passionate about literacy programs and weekend volunteer work at animal shelters. Her photos showed her reading to children, hiking local trails, baking cookies that looked slightly lopsided but delicious, playing with rescue dogs. Elena's bio mentioned her love for old movies, her terrible singing voice that she inflicted on her plants while watering them, and her dream of someday traveling to see the Northern Lights, though she admitted it would take years of saving to afford such a trip. What struck Marcus immediately was that Elena's profile contained no hints about seeking financial security or lifestyle upgrades. She wrote about wanting a partner who shared her values of kindness, honesty, and making a positive difference in the world. She mentioned loving simple pleasures, Sunday morning pancakes, bookstore browsing, beach walks regardless of weather, and conversations that lasted until sunrise because neither person wanted the evening to end. Their first message exchange lasted hours. Elena asked Matt about his design work, genuinely curious about his creative process and the challenges of freelance life. She shared funny stories about her students, her frustrations with educational budget cuts, and her joy when struggling. Reader finally experienced that magical moment of comprehension. They discovered shared interests in hiking, obscure documentaries, and a mutual obsession with finding the perfect hole-in-the-wall taco truck. Marcus found himself staying up until 3 in the morning, typing and deleting messages, wanting to present the most authentic version of Matt, while being careful not to slip into the privileged perspective that had shaped his actual life experiences. Elena's responses showed a depth of empathy and emotional intelligence that had been absent from every relationship in his previous experience. She asked follow-up questions not because she was gathering information for some ulterior purpose, but because she genuinely cared about his thoughts, fears, and aspirations. After 2 weeks of messaging, Elena suggested they meet in person. She proposed a casual coffee date at a small, independent shop in Capitol Hill, the kind of place where drinks cost $4 instead of $14 and students came to study rather than conduct business deals. Marcus felt more nervous about this first date than he had about any boardroom presentation or high-stakes negotiation. This wasn't about impressing someone with his accomplishments or connections. This was about being liked for personality, humor, and the intangible chemistry that made two people want to spend more time together. The coffee date exceeded every expectation Marcus had dared to harbor. Elena arrived exactly on time, wearing a sundress that looked both elegant and practical, carrying a worn leather bag that had clearly seen years of faithful service. Her smile when she spotted Matt was genuine and slightly shy.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Kind of expression that came from real anticipation rather than calculated charm. They found a corner table near the window, and conversation flowed so naturally that 2 hours passed like 20 minutes. Elena talked about her students with the kind of passion that made her face light up. She described the challenges of teaching in an underfunded district, the creativity required to make learning engaging without adequate resources, and the incredible resilience she witnessed in children who faced difficulties at home but still came to school ready to discover new worlds through books. Marcus found himself completely absorbed in her stories, asking questions about educational theory and classroom management that came from genuine curiosity rather than polite interest. When Elena asked about Matt's design work, Marcus drew on his real appreciation for visual creativity while carefully staying within the bounds of his assumed identity. He talked about the satisfaction of helping small businesses develop their brand identity, the challenge of creating compelling graphics on tight budgets, and his dream of someday having enough financial stability to take on more artistic projects that might not be immediately profitable but would fulfill his creative vision. What surprised Marcus most was how naturally Elena assumed they would split the bill. There was no expectation that he would pay for her coffee and pastry, no subtle hints about chivalry or traditional gender roles. She simply calculated her portion when the check arrived and left an appropriate tip, treating their date as an equal partnership from the very beginning. This small gesture moved him more than any expensive gift he had ever received or given. Their first date led to a second, then a third, then regular meetings that began to feel like the foundation of something significant. Elena introduced Matt to her world, volunteering at the animal shelter where she spent Saturday mornings walking dogs and socializing cats, attending community theater productions by local companies that performed in converted warehouses and church basements, exploring farmers markets where vendors sold produce that was both affordable and supporting local agriculture. Marcus discovered aspects of the city he had never experienced despite living there his entire life. Through Elena's eyes, Seattle wasn't about exclusive restaurants and private clubs. It was about neighborhood gyms that had been serving the same families for generations, public parks where communities gathered for festivals and celebrations, hiking trails that required nothing more than a pair of decent boots and the willingness to be surprised by natural beauty that cost nothing to access. Their relationship developed with a pace and authenticity that felt completely foreign to Marcus's previous romantic experiences. There were no expensive dinners or luxury vacations to accelerate intimacy. Instead, they grew closer through shared experiences that cost little but revealed everything about their compatibility. They cooked dinner together in Elena's tiny kitchen, taking turns choosing recipes and laughing when ambitious culinary experiments resulted in disasters that they turned into inside jokes. Elena's apartment became Marcus's favorite place in the world. It was small and filled with personal touches that told the story of her life. Photographs from family gatherings, artwork created by former students, books with worn covers that had been read multiple times, plants in mismatched pots that she talked to while watering them with gentle encouragement. The space felt alive in a way that his penthouse, despite its designer perfection and million-dollar view, never had. They established traditions that became precious to both of them. Sunday morning pancakes with whatever fruit was on sale that week. Evening walks through different neighborhoods, discovering architecture and local history that Elena researched because she believed every place had stories worth knowing. Movie nights with films from the library's collection, creating elaborate snack combinations because movie theater concessions weren't in Matt's fictional budget. Elena's friends welcomed Matt with warmth that seemed genuine rather than polite. They were teachers, nurses, social workers, and artists who had built a community around shared values rather than shared wealth. Friday night gatherings involved potluck dinners where everyone contributed according to their means, board game tournaments that lasted until midnight, and conversations about books, current events, and dreams that didn't require trust funds to achieve. Marcus found himself becoming protective of his Matt identity, not because he was afraid of being discovered, but because the person he was with Elena felt more authentic than the Marcus who had existed for 28 years. Matt worried about making rent on time, celebrated small freelance successes, and planned dates around free community events. Matt appreciated Elena's thoughtful gifts, a book by his favorite author found at a used bookstore, homemade cookies for stressful work, deadlines, or a sketch she had drawn of him reading in the park because she thought he looked peaceful and wanted to capture that moment. 3 months into their relationship, Elena shared something that made Marcus's deception feel increasingly complicated. She confided that she had dated men who seemed more interested in her potential to fit into their lifestyle than in building a partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals. She appreciated that Matt understood financial constraints, that he suggested dates within both their budgets, that he seemed genuinely excited about simple pleasures rather than treating them as novelties or temporary compromises. Elena told Matt about her previous relationship with someone from a wealthy family, how the experience had taught her to be cautious about dating across significant economic divides. She explained that the differences hadn't been just about money, but about worldview, priorities, and assumptions about how relationships should function. Her ex-boyfriend had been generous with expensive gestures, but dismissive of her career, suggesting that her teaching salary was cute rather than meaningful, and that her concerns about student welfare were admirable, but ultimately naive. As Elena shared these experiences, Marcus felt the weight of his deception growing heavier. Every day that passed made the truth more difficult to reveal and more potentially devastating when Elena inevitably discovered it. He began to imagine scenarios where he could gradually introduce his real financial situation, perhaps suggesting that Matt's design business was growing more successful than expected, but every approach felt manipulative and dishonest. The turning point came during their 4th month together, when Elena mentioned a financial crisis that threatened to derail her volunteer work at the animal shelter. The organization was facing closure due to funding cuts and rising operating costs. Elena had been volunteering there for 3 years, and the thought of the animals losing their temporary home while waiting for adoption broke her heart. She spoke about organizing fundraising events and grant applications with the determination of someone who refused to accept defeat when something important was at stake. Marcus listened to Elena's passionate description of her rescue efforts and felt torn between his genuine desire to help and the limitations of his assumed identity. Matt, the struggling freelancer, might be able to contribute a modest donation or volunteer additional hours, but he couldn't single-handedly solve the shelter's financial problems. Marcus, the billionaire heir, could write a check that would secure the facility's future indefinitely, but that person wasn't supposed to exist in Elena's world. The internal conflict intensified when Elena asked Matt if he would help with a fundraising event she was organizing. She needed someone with design skills to create promotional materials, and she promised to pay him whatever she could afford from her limited savings. The request was so perfectly aligned with Matt's supposed expertise and Elena's genuine need that refusing would have seemed suspicious and cruel. Marcus agreed to help, knowing that his professional design skills were virtually non-existent, but determined to find a way to support Elena's cause without revealing his true identity. Creating promotional materials for the animal shelter fundraiser required Marcus to genuinely learn basic design software and principles. He spent sleepless nights watching tutorials and practicing techniques, driven by his commitment to Elena and his growing understanding of how much this cause meant to her. The work was harder than any business deal he had ever negotiated, but it felt more meaningful because success was measured by Elena's smile when she saw the finished flyers and posters. The fundraising event itself became a revelation for Marcus about community organizing and grassroots activism. Elena had coordinated with local businesses to donate auction items, recruited volunteers to manage registration and cleanup, and created a program that balanced entertainment with education about animal welfare. Watching her manage dozens of moving parts with grace and determination showed Marcus leadership qualities that had nothing to do with inherited authority or financial resources. The event raised enough money to keep the shelter operating for 6 more months, buying time for more sustainable funding solutions. Elena's joy at the outcome was infectious, and her gratitude toward everyone who had contributed made Marcus understand the difference between charity as tax deduction and charity as community investment. She thanked Matt repeatedly for his design work, crediting the professional-looking materials with attracting more attendees than previous events had managed. That night, as they walked home from the fundraiser, Elena took Matt's hand and told him that she was falling in love with him. She said that his willingness to learn new skills to help with something important to her showed the kind of character she had been hoping to find in a partner. She appreciated that he understood her values and supported her commitments even when they required sacrifice and hard work without guaranteed success. Marcus felt his heart break and soar simultaneously. Elena's declaration of love was everything he had hoped to hear, but it was directed toward a person who didn't actually exist. The Matt she loved was a composite of Marcus's better impulses filtered through artificial constraints that had taught him to appreciate simplicity and authenticity. The question that haunted him was whether Elena could love the real Marcus, whose life experience had been shaped by unlimited resources and inherited privilege. The relationship continued to deepen throughout the fall and winter. Elena and Matt created holiday traditions that reflected their shared values and budget constraints. They volunteered together at a community kitchen on Thanksgiving, attended free holiday concerts and festivals, and exchanged gifts that emphasized thoughtfulness over expense. Elena gave Matt a journal bound in leather she had crafted herself, filled with prompts about creative inspiration and personal growth. Marcus gave Elena a collection of children's books that he had carefully selected based on her descriptions of her students' interests and reading levels. Their physical relationship developed with the same natural progression that characterized every other aspect of their connection. Elena's apartment became their shared sanctuary, where they could be completely themselves without external pressures or expectations. Marcus learned to sleep peacefully in a bed that cost less than his monthly car payment, waking up next to someone who loved him for reasons that had nothing to do with his bank account balance. The closest call came in February, when Elena suggested they attend a gallery opening for a local artist whose work she admired. The event was at a downtown venue that Marcus recognized as one of his family's properties, and several attendees were people from his actual social circle. He managed to steer Elena away from potential recognition by suggesting they view the artwork from a different section of the gallery, but the experience reminded him how precarious his deception had become. Spring brought new challenges and opportunities. Elena was offered a position at a private school that would pay significantly more than her current public school salary, but she was conflicted about leaving her current students and the community where she felt most needed. She discussed the decision with Matt over several weeks, weighing the financial benefits against her sense of mission and loyalty to her current school. Her thought process revealed values and priorities that Marcus found both admirable and increasingly intimidating as he considered how to reveal his true identity. The moment of truth arrived on a warm Saturday morning in May. Elena had planned a surprise for Matt, a picnic in Discovery Park followed by a visit to an art fair where she hoped to find a piece they could afford to hang in his apartment. She had been saving for weeks to make this date special, choosing items for their picnic lunch based on both appeal and budget. Her excitement about this modest celebration made Marcus realize that his deception had reached a point where continuing it was causing more harm than revealing it. As they spread their blanket overlooking Puget Sound, Elena pulled out a small wrapped package. Inside was a keychain she had made from a piece of sea glass found during one of their beach walks, polished and set in a simple silver wire frame. She explained that she wanted Matt to have something to remind him of their relationship when they weren't together, and she hoped that someday they might be ready to take the next step of moving in together. The gift and its accompanying explanation created a crisis of conscience that Marcus could no longer ignore. Elena was making plans for their future based on completely false information about his identity, financial situation, and life circumstances. Her growing investment in their relationship made his deception feel increasingly cruel, regardless of his original intentions. He realized that every day he waited to tell the truth made the eventual revelation more devastating and potentially unforgivable. That evening, Marcus made a decision that terrified him more than any business risk he had ever taken. He was going to tell Elena the truth about who he really was, knowing that the revelation would likely end the relationship that had become the most important thing in his life. He spent the night crafting and discarding explanations, trying to find words that could convey his genuine feelings while acknowledging the magnitude of his deception. The conversation happened 3 days later, during what was supposed to be a casual dinner at Elena's apartment. Marcus had been unusually quiet throughout the meal, and Elena noticed his distraction. When she asked if something was bothering him, Marcus realized that the moment had arrived. He set down his fork, looked directly into her eyes, and said the words that would change everything between them. "Elena, there's something I need to tell you about myself, and I'm terrified that you're going to hate me when you learn the truth." Elena's expression shifted from concern to alarm. She reached across the table to take his hand, encouraging him to continue, while her mind clearly raced through possibilities about what kind of secret could provoke such anguish. Marcus began with an apology for the deception, then slowly revealed the truth about his identity. He explained about his family's wealth, his inheritance, his previous experiences with relationships that felt transactional rather than authentic. He described the loneliness that had driven him to create the Matt persona and his growing realization that pretending to be someone else was not a sustainable foundation for the relationship he wanted with her. Elena listened without interruption, her expression cycling through confusion, shock, hurt, and something that might have been understanding. When Marcus finished speaking, the silence stretched between them like a chasm. Elena withdrew her hand from his and sat back in her chair, processing information that reframed every interaction they had shared over the past 8 months. The questions came slowly at first, then in a torrent. Elena wanted to know about every aspect of Marcus's real life: his work, his living situation, his previous relationships, his family dynamics. She asked about specific moments in their relationship, trying to understand what had been genuine and what had been performance. The conversation lasted until dawn, with Elena alternating between anger at the deception and curiosity about the person Marcus actually was. The most painful moment came when Elena asked whether Marcus had been documenting their relationship for some kind of social experiment or entertainment project. The hurt in her voice when she posed this question made Marcus realize how the revelation must feel from her perspective, like discovering that someone had been studying her life as an anthropological curiosity rather than participating in it as an equal partner. Marcus's emotional response to her question seemed to convince Elena that his feelings had been genuine, even if his identity had been false. He broke down completely, explaining that his love for her was the most real thing he had ever experienced, and that the thought of losing her was unbearable. He admitted that he had originally planned to reveal the truth much earlier, but had been terrified of her reaction and had kept postponing the conversation until it became impossible to delay any longer. Elena asked for space to process everything she had learned. She needed time to sort through her feelings about the deception, to consider whether a relationship could survive such a fundamental breach of trust, and to decide whether she could love the real Marcus as much as she had loved the fictional Matt. They agreed not to contact each other for a week while Elena worked through her thoughts and emotions. The week of separation was agony for Marcus. He couldn't focus on work, couldn't sleep properly, and found himself constantly checking his phone for messages that didn't come. He realized that he had become dependent on Elena's presence in his life in ways that went far beyond romantic attachment. She had become his connection to authenticity, his guide to a way of living that prioritized relationships and experiences over material accumulation. During that week, Marcus made practical changes that he hoped would demonstrate his commitment to becoming the person Elena had fallen in love with. He moved out of his penthouse and into the modest apartment he had been renting as Matt, making it his primary residence rather than a temporary performance space. He scaled back his involvement in the family business to focus on work that felt meaningful rather than merely profitable. He began volunteering at organizations similar to Elena's animal shelter, using his resources to support causes he had learned to care about through her influence. When Elena finally called, her voice was cautious but not hostile. She agreed to meet him at the same coffee shop where they had their first date, suggesting that returning to the beginning might help them figure out if there was a path forward. Marcus arrived early and sat in the same corner table, feeling more nervous than he had 8 months earlier when he was pretending to be someone else. Elena looked tired when she walked in, as if she had spent the week in the same kind of emotional turmoil that had consumed Marcus. She ordered the same coffee and pastry she had chosen on their first date, then sat across from him with an expression that was difficult to read. For several minutes, they simply looked at each other, both apparently struggling to find the right words to begin this crucial conversation. Elena spoke first, explaining that she had spent the week trying to separate her anger about the deception from her feelings about the person Marcus had shown himself to be during their relationship. She acknowledged that his behavior as Matt had been consistently kind, supportive, and genuine, even if his circumstances had been fictional. She said that she had come to understand his original motivation, even if she couldn't entirely forgive the length of time he had maintained the deception. The turning point in their conversation came when Elena asked Marcus to describe who he wanted to be, independent of both his inherited wealth and his Matt persona. She wanted to know whether his interest in simpler living and community involvement had been purely performative or whether the experiences of the past 8 months had genuinely changed his priorities and values. Marcus's response was the most honest he had ever been with another person. He explained that living as Matt had taught him things about himself that he never would have discovered otherwise. He had learned that he was capable of finding joy in simple pleasures, that he could form friendships based on shared interests rather than networking opportunities, and that he could love someone completely without any consideration of what that person could do for his social status or business interests. He told Elena that he wanted to continue living modestly, not as a performance or an experiment, but because the past 8 months had been the happiest of his life. He expressed his desire to use his inherited resources in ways that supported causes they both cared about, rather than accumulating luxury items that provided temporary satisfaction but no lasting meaning. He asked Elena to help him navigate this transformation, acknowledging that he still had much to learn about living according to the values he had discovered during their relationship. Elena's response was measured and thoughtful. She said that she was willing to try rebuilding their relationship, but with complete honesty about their different backgrounds and the challenges those differences might create. She wanted to understand Marcus's world so that she could make informed decisions about their compatibility, rather than loving an idealized version of him that ignored the realities of his family situation and social obligations. The process of rebuilding their relationship was more difficult than either of them had anticipated. Elena visited Marcus's real apartment, met members of his family, and attended social events where she was introduced as his girlfriend rather than someone he was casually dating. Each new experience required adjustment and communication about comfort levels, expectations, and boundaries. Elena struggled with some aspects of Marcus's wealth, particularly the assumptions that other people made about her motivations for dating him. She faced scrutiny from his family members who questioned whether she was truly interested in Marcus or primarily attracted to his financial resources. Some of Marcus's friends made comments about Elena's background and career that revealed their own prejudices about class differences and the value of public service work. Marcus, meanwhile, had to learn how to navigate his inherited privilege in ways that honored Elena's values and their relationship. He made mistakes, sometimes offering solutions to problems that Elena preferred to solve herself, or suggesting experiences that seemed extravagant rather than meaningful. The learning curve was steep, but his commitment to understanding Elena's perspective remained unwavering. The relationship faced its greatest test 6 months after Marcus's revelation, when his family pressured him to attend a high-profile charity gala where Elena would be expected to participate in social rituals she found uncomfortable and artificial. Elena felt like she was being asked to perform a version of herself that didn't match her authentic personality, while Marcus felt caught between his family obligations and his commitment to his relationship. They nearly broke up during the argument that followed the gala. Elena accused Marcus of trying to change her into someone who would fit more easily into his predetermined life path. Marcus accused Elena of being unwilling to compromise or make space for the realities of his family situation. The fight revealed tensions that had been building since Marcus's revelation, and both of them wondered whether their different backgrounds made long-term compatibility impossible. The resolution came when they decided to seek couples counseling to help them navigate the unique challenges of their relationship. The therapist helped them understand that their love for each other was genuine, but that successful partnership would require ongoing negotiation and mutual support as they created a shared life that honored both of their backgrounds and values. Through counseling, they developed strategies for managing family expectations, social pressures, and financial decisions in ways that felt fair and respectful to both partners. Elena learned to advocate for herself in social situations where she felt out of place, while Marcus learned to use his privilege in ways that supported their shared goals rather than creating additional pressure or obligation. 1 year after Marcus's revelation, they had found a rhythm that worked for both of them. Marcus continued to live modestly while using his resources to support causes they both cared about. Elena maintained her teaching career while accepting Marcus's help with student supply purchases and classroom improvements that benefited her students without compromising her professional independence. Their relationship had become a model for how people from different economic backgrounds could build genuine partnership based on shared values and mutual respect. They had learned that love required more than compatibility and attraction. It demanded ongoing commitment to understanding each other's perspectives and creating space for both partners to remain authentic while growing together. The engagement came during a quiet moment that perfectly captured the evolution of their relationship. They were volunteering together at the animal shelter where they had first worked side by side, taking a break from cleaning kennels to sit in the small garden behind the facility. Elena was telling Marcus about a student who had finally mastered a difficult reading concept, her face glowing with the satisfaction that came from witnessing educational breakthrough. Marcus realized that he wanted to spend the rest of his life watching Elena discover new ways to make a difference in the world. He wanted to support her dreams, learn from her wisdom, and build a family with someone who had taught him that the most valuable things in life couldn't be purchased or inherited. The proposal was simple, a vintage ring that belonged to his grandmother, offered with words that came from the heart rather than from rehearsed preparation. Elena's acceptance was equally straightforward. She said yes because she loved the man Marcus had become, someone who had learned to value authenticity over appearance and meaningful work over financial gain. She said yes because their relationship had taught her that compromise didn't require sacrifice of core values, and that partnership could make both people stronger and more capable of positive impact. Their wedding was a reflection of everything they had learned about what mattered most. The ceremony took place in the community garden where Elena volunteered, surrounded by friends from both of their worlds who had come to respect and appreciate their partnership. The reception featured food donated by local restaurants they had discovered during their dates, music provided by the high school jazz band Elena had helped fundraise for, and decorations created by Marcus using the design skills he had developed during their early relationship. The most meaningful moment came during their vows, when Elena thanked Marcus for showing her that love could survive complete honesty, and Marcus thanked Elena for teaching him that authenticity was worth more than any inheritance. They promised to continue growing together, supporting each other's dreams, and using their combined resources to make a positive difference in their community. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, surrounded by people who had witnessed their journey from deception to authentic partnership, Marcus reflected on how different his life had become since that night when he had decided to create a fake dating profile. The map persona had been abandoned long ago, but the lessons learned during those months of pretending to be someone else had fundamentally changed who Marcus really was. Elena had fallen in love with Matt, but she had chosen to marry Marcus. The difference was crucial. Matt had been an idealized version of who Marcus hoped he could become, while Marcus was the complex, imperfect, but genuine person who was committed to living according to the values Elena had helped him discover. Their love story had become proof that authenticity was worth fighting for, even when the path toward it required uncomfortable honesty and difficult growth. The story of Marcus and Elena spread through their community as an example of how love could bridge differences when both partners were committed to understanding and supporting each other. Friends and family members often asked them for advice about navigating their own relationship challenges, and they always emphasized the same principles: honesty from the beginning, willingness to be vulnerable, respect for each other's backgrounds and values, and commitment to growing together rather than trying to change each other. Years later, as they raised their own children and continued their work in education and community development, Marcus and Elena remained grateful for the unconventional beginning of their relationship. The deception that could have destroyed their partnership had instead taught them both invaluable lessons about authenticity, privilege, and the difference between loving someone for who they appear to be and loving them for who they truly are. Their love story became a testament to the possibility of second chances, honest communication, and the transformative power of genuine connection. It proved that the most meaningful relationships are built not on perfect beginnings, but on the willingness to be honest about imperfections and work together towards something better than either person could achieve alone. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.